Hi, this is Nicole. I serve as one of the spokespersons for Nehemiah Reset. Today I wanted to discuss how the modern education system is failing today's generation. This is the first video in the series on today's education system. The modern education system, once the bedrock of Western civilization and the engine of social mobility, is undergoing a transformation so profound that its very purpose is being called into question. What was designed to create informed, capable, and critically thinking citizens has increasingly become an institution that produces the opposite: graduates who are emotionally fragile, intellectually incurious, and ideologically programmed. The problems plaguing education today are not isolated incidents but interconnected symptoms of a fundamental philosophical shift away from knowledge transmission toward social engineering, away from excellence toward equity, and away from intellectual rigor toward ideological conformity. This comprehensive examination will explore the multifaceted crisis in modern education, from the commercialization of academic dishonesty to the systematic dismantling of traditional curricula, from the rise of therapeutic education to the weaponization of classrooms for political activism. The stakes could not be higher, as we are essentially gambling with the future of civilization itself by failing to properly educate the next generation. The first area where we see the destruction is from the academic cheating industrial complex. Perhaps the most visible symptom of education's decay is the thriving industry built around helping students cheat. What was once a cottage operation of shady paper mills has evolved into a sophisticated, global enterprise worth billions annually. Companies like Chegg, Course Hero, and countless smaller operators have built entire business models around facilitating academic dishonesty, all while operating in a legal gray area that allows them to evade meaningful consequences. The scale of this problem is staggering. Studies indicate that anywhere from 60% to 80% of college students admit to some form of cheating during their academic careers. The reasons are manifold: overwhelming pressure to succeed, an education system that often values grades over learning, and the increasing normalization of cutting corners as a survival strategy. What's particularly insidious is how these cheating services have rebranded themselves as educational support or study aids, blurring the line between legitimate help and outright fraud. Chegg, for instance, presents itself as a legitimate educational platform while simultaneously providing direct answers to homework problems and exam questions. Their expert Q&A service allows students to upload assignments and receive completed work within hours, effectively outsourcing their education to anonymous freelancers who may or may not have expertise in the subject matter. The company has faced lawsuits from universities but continues to operate profitably, exploiting the desperation of students and the inability of educational institutions to keep pace with technology. Even more concerning are the essay writing services that explicitly offer to complete entire assignments for students. These operations, often based in countries like Kenya, India, or the Philippines, employ writers who churn out custom essays, research papers, and even dissertations for a fraction of what a Western tutor would charge. The quality varies wildly, but that's almost beside the point. The very existence of these services undermines the fundamental purpose of education, which is to develop one's own thinking and communication skills. The psychological impact on students who use these services is profound. By externalizing their intellectual labor, they deprive themselves of the opportunity to develop critical thinking, research skills, and the ability to articulate complex ideas. They enter the workforce with credentials they didn't earn and skills they don't possess, creating a dangerous mismatch between their perceived capabilities and actual abilities. This not only harms the students themselves but also erodes the value of educational credentials for everyone. Secondly, we see that the current generation is being dumbed down by today's curriculum. Parallel to the rise of academic dishonesty is the systematic simplification of educational content. The rigorous, challenging curricula that once characterized quality education have been replaced with watered-down versions that prioritize accessibility over excellence. This trend is evident across all levels of education, from elementary school through university. In mathematics education, the the decline has been particularly precipitous. Traditional approaches that emphasized mastery of fundamental concepts through practice and repetition have been replaced with reform math methodologies that prioritize conceptual understanding over computational skills. While conceptual understanding is important, the neglect of basic arithmetic and algebraic manipulation has produced generations of students who struggle with basic calculations and lack the mathematical fluency necessary for advanced study in STEM fields. The consequences of this mathematical illiteracy are far-reaching. Students who cannot perform basic calculations without calculators, who struggle with fractions and percentages, and who lack algebraic reasoning skills find themselves ill-prepared for college-level mathematics and, by extension, careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This contributes to the persistent skills gap in these critical fields and forces companies to look abroad for talent. English and language arts have suffered a similar fate. The systematic study of grammar, syntax, and vocabulary, the building blocks of effective communication, has been largely abandoned in favor of more creative approaches that prioritize self-expression over technical proficiency. Students graduate high school unable to write coherent paragraphs, construct logical arguments, or recognize basic grammatical errors. College professors increasingly report having to remediate basic writing skills that should have been mastered in secondary school. Perhaps most troubling is the decline in historical knowledge. The systematic study of history, with its emphasis on understanding cause and effect, recognizing patterns, and learning from past mistakes, has been replaced with fragmented, thematic approaches that often sacrifice chronological understanding for contemporary relevance. Students graduate with little knowledge of major historical events, figures, or movements, making them vulnerable to manipulation and unable to contextualize current events within their proper historical framework. This dumbing down is not accidental but reflects a philosophical shift in educational priorities. The traditional view of education as the transmission of accumulated cultural knowledge has been replaced by a student-centered approach that prioritizes engagement, self-esteem, and emotional comfort over intellectual challenge. While well-intentioned, this approach has produced students who are confident but incompetent, self-assured but ignorant. The third area where we see problems is the ideological capture of curriculum. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of modern education's decline is the systematic replacement of traditional academic content with ideological programming. Core subjects like mathematics, English, history, and science are increasingly being subordinated to political agendas that prioritize social justice activism over intellectual development. Mathematics education has been particularly targeted by this ideological transformation. Proponents of ethnomathematics argue that traditional mathematics is inherently racist and Eurocentric, advocating instead for approaches that emphasize the mathematical contributions of non-Western cultures. While cultural diversity in mathematics education has value, the extreme version of this approach often devolves into political indoctrination that neglects the universal nature of mathematical truth. Some school districts have even proposed eliminating advanced mathematics courses altogether on the grounds that they perpetuate racial inequities, despite evidence that such courses provide crucial pathways to economic mobility for disadvantaged students. While sensitivity to students' emotional needs is important, the therapeutic model of education has dangerous implications. It teaches students that emotional discomfort is something to be avoided rather than a necessary component of intellectual growth. It reinforces the idea that students are fragile beings who cannot withstand exposure to challenging ideas or perspectives. Perhaps most troublingly, it transforms education from a process of intellectual discovery into a form of emotional therapy. The consequences of this therapeutic approach are evident in the increasing fragility of students. Reports of anxiety and depression among college students have skyrocketed in recent years, with many students lacking the resilience to cope with academic challenges or intellectual disagreement. The very interventions designed to protect students' emotional well-being may be contributing to their psychological fragility by denying them opportunities to develop coping skills and emotional resilience. This therapeutic model also has implications for academic freedom. When students' emotional comfort becomes the primary concern of education, challenging ideas become increasingly difficult to discuss. Complex historical events, controversial scientific theories, and classic literary works that deal with difficult themes may be avoided or heavily sanitized to prevent causing emotional distress. This creates a chilling effect on intellectual discourse and deprives students of the opportunity to engage with the full complexity of human experience and knowledge. The therapeutic model extends beyond emotional comfort to encompass a broader focus on self-esteem and personal validation. Grading practices have been modified to minimize failure, with some schools eliminating grades below 50% or allowing unlimited retakes on assignments. While these practices may boost students' confidence in the short term, they ultimately undermine the development of resilience and perseverance. Real-world success often requires learning from failure, yet our educational system increasingly shields students from this essential experience. Perhaps most insidiously, the therapeutic model of education blurs the boundary between education and therapy, placing teachers and professors in the role of mental health professionals for which they are not qualified. This not only diverts educational resources away from their primary purpose but also risks providing inadequate support for students with serious mental health needs. The proper response to growing mental health challenges among students is not to transform education into therapy but to ensure access to qualified mental health professionals while maintaining education's focus on intellectual development. Another problem area is what I call the professionalization of protest. One of the most alarming developments in modern education is the systematic training of students in political activism. What was once the organic expression of student idealism has become a professionalized, curriculum-driven enterprise that teaches students not how to think but what to think, and not just how to protest but what to protest. This professionalization of protest begins early, with social justice activism being integrated into elementary school curricula. Young children are taught about privilege, oppression, and systemic racism before they have the developmental capacity to understand these complex concepts. They are encouraged to participate in protests and demonstrations on issues they cannot possibly comprehend in their full complexity. This early political indoctrination replaces the development of critical thinking with the formation of ideological commitments. In middle and high school, this activist training becomes more sophisticated. Students learn about various forms of protest, from marches and sit-ins to social media campaigns and direct action. They are taught specific protest tactics and strategies, often under the guise of civic education or community engagement. While civic engagement is valuable, the one-sided nature of this education, which invariably focuses on progressive causes and protest methods, raises serious questions about indoctrination rather than education. By the time students reach university, this activity training reaches its zenith. Many colleges and universities now offer majors and minors in social justice, activism, or similar fields that essentially professionalize protest. These programs teach students how to organize campaigns, frame narratives, and apply pressure on institutions to achieve political goals. They are less academic programs than training grounds for political activism, complete with internships at activist organizations and guidance on pursuing careers in the protest industry. The consequences of this professionalization of protest are profound. It transforms students from learners into activists, from seekers of truth into advocates for causes. It prioritizes political action over intellectual understanding, teaching students how to change the world before they understand how the world works. Perhaps most troublingly, it creates a generation of students who view every issue through a political lens, reducing complex realities to simplistic narratives of oppression and resistance. This activist orientation also fundamentally alters the relationship between students and educational institutions. Rather than seeing themselves as members of a learning community, students increasingly view themselves as political actors who must pressure their institutions to adopt particular ideological positions. This creates an adversarial dynamic that undermines the collaborative nature of education and transforms campuses into political battlegrounds rather than spaces for intellectual exploration. The next area I want to explore is the administrative bloat and mission creep. While much attention has been focused on curricular and pedagogical issues, another significant problem plaguing modern education is the explosive growth of administrative bureaucracy and the corresponding mission creep that has diverted educational institutions from their core purpose. Over the past few decades, colleges and universities have seen a dramatic increase in administrative positions, far outpacing the growth in faculty positions. These new administrative roles often focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, student wellness, sustainability, and various other initiatives that, while potentially valuable, are peripheral to the core educational mission. The result is an increasingly top-heavy institutional structure that consumes resources that could otherwise be devoted to teaching and research. This administrative bloat has significant financial implications. The growth in administrative positions has been a major driver of the skyrocketing cost of higher education, contributing to the student debt crisis that burdens millions of graduates. Students and their families are paying more for an education that delivers less in terms of actual learning, as a larger share of resources is diverted to administrative functions rather than academic ones. Beyond the financial implications, this administrative expansion has transformed the culture of educational institutions. The increasing influence of non-academic administrators has shifted institutional priorities away from academic excellence toward metrics of diversity, wellness, and social justice. Faculty find themselves subject to increasing bureaucratic oversight and pressure to conform to institutional priorities that may have little to do with educational quality. By the time students reach university, this activity training reaches its zenith. Many colleges and universities now offer majors and minors in social justice, activism, or similar fields that essentially professionalize protest. These programs teach students how to organize campaigns, frame narratives, and apply pressure on institutions to achieve political goals. They are less academic programs than training grounds for political activism, complete with internships at activist organizations and guidance on pursuing careers in the protest industry. The consequences of this professionalization of protest are profound. It transforms students from learners into activists, from seekers of truth into advocates for causes. It prioritizes political action over intellectual understanding, teaching students how to change the world before they understand how the world works. Perhaps most troublingly, it creates a generation of students who view every issue through a political lens, reducing complex realities to simplistic narratives of oppression and resistance. This activist orientation also fundamentally alters the relationship between students and educational institutions. Rather than seeing themselves as members of a learning community, students increasingly view themselves as political actors who must pressure their institutions to adopt particular ideological positions. This creates an adversarial dynamic that undermines the collaborative nature of education and transforms campuses into political battlegrounds rather than spaces for intellectual exploration. The next area I want to explore is the administrative bloat and mission creep. While much attention has been focused on curricular and pedagogical issues, another significant problem plaguing modern education is the explosive growth of administrative bureaucracy and the corresponding mission creep that has diverted educational institutions from their core purpose. Over the past few decades, colleges and universities have seen a dramatic increase in administrative positions, far outpacing the growth in faculty positions. These new administrative roles often focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, student wellness, sustainability, and various other initiatives that, while potentially valuable, are peripheral to the core educational mission. The result is an increasingly top-heavy institutional structure that consumes resources that could otherwise be devoted to teaching and research. This administrative bloat has significant financial implications. The growth in administrative positions has been a major driver of the skyrocketing cost of higher education, contributing to the student debt crisis that burdens millions of graduates. Students and their families are paying more for an education that delivers less in terms of actual learning, as a larger share of resources is diverted to administrative functions rather than academic ones. Beyond the financial implications, This administrative expansion has transformed the culture of educational institutions. The increasing influence of non-academic administrators has shifted institutional priorities away from academic excellence toward metrics of diversity, wellness, and social justice. Faculty find themselves subject to increasing bureaucratic oversight and pressure to conform to institutional priorities that may have little to do with educational quality. This mission creep is particularly evident in the proliferation of diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives. While creating inclusive environments is important, the DEI industry has become a self-perpetuating bureaucracy that often implements divisive policies and practices. Mandatory diversity training, bias response teams, and ideological litmus tests for hiring and promotion have become common features of the educational landscape, often with little evidence of effectiveness and considerable potential for harm. The administrative state in education also extends to K-12 schools, where district-level bureaucracies have grown exponentially. School districts now employ vast numbers of administrators, consultants, and specialists who implement ever-changing educational fads and initiatives. Teachers find themselves buried under paperwork and required to attend endless professional development sessions on the latest educational trends, leaving them with less time and energy for actual teaching. This administrative bloat and mission creep represent a profound misallocation of educational resources. At a time when educational outcomes are stagnating or declining, we are diverting increasing resources to peripheral functions rather than focusing on the fundamental purpose of education: transmitting knowledge and developing intellectual capabilities. Thanks for watching. This concludes the first video in this series on issues with today's education system. To watch the other videos in this series, go to our rumble.com or youtubeb.com channels. To watch other videos like this one, you can go to our website at nehemiahreset.org, to our rumble.com or youtube.com channels. We publish new videos weekly. You can also sign up to receive our weekly new video list by going to nehemiahreset.org/email and sign up for our weekly newsletter. To help our channel, please like and subscribe so that more people can see these important videos. Thanks for watching and have a great day.
Are you looking for a limitless supply of insightful reads to expand your mind and transform your life? Look no further than Nehemiah Reset's ebook library, where knowledge meets inspiration at nehemiahreset.org ebook. Go there today to discover a wealth of valuable resources to help you on your personal and professional journey to build a biblical worldview. Learn more about the Bible and how culture is impacting your worldview. Again, the ebook library is located at nehemiahreset.org ebook. Hope to see you soon. My name is Andrew. I am one of the spokespersons for Nehemiah Reset. The prior video was sponsored by Nehemiah Reset, a 501c3. Our mission is to assist Christians in developing a biblical worldview as it pertains to relevant cultural and biblical issues. We seek to inform Christ's followers, equip them, and mobilize them in action to vote for their biblical values and actively engage in our We are also committed to help Christians and non-believers to develop a better biblical view. Nehemiah Reset produces videos and ebooks to assist members of the church in developing a biblical worldview when it comes to cultural issues. We produce videos on key topics like public school indoctrination, the woke agenda, sex education, equity and inclusion, climate change, immigration, religious freedom, and much, much more. To learn more about Nehemiah Reset or to watch our latest videos, go to our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. We produce 2 to 3 videos every week. To get a weekly list of our latest videos, sign up for our weekly newsletter by going to nehemiahreset.org/email and subscribe. You can support our website by liking our videos, subscribing to our channels, or helping us reach more people through tax-exempt donations. Thanks for your help in growing God's kingdom and bringing more people to Christ. Thank you for your support and help. Come back again soon. Have a great day.